Once you understand your niche, that at the same time is going to allow you to understand also to which extent you can scale. Because people say, okay, I'm doing currently $1 million, but I want to get to $100 million. But then when we go into the niche, like the actual niche itself, I aggregate the revenue is only $50 million. So even if you grew as much as you wanted, there's not enough volume to sustain your goal in terms of how much you want to scale. PPC can break your business very fast, because if you start basically attaching the wrong amount of aggressiveness to your strategy, in a matter of months you're gonna burn all the money. The focus is not being going towards the right objectives, and then you're not gonna scale. Once you figure out the branding and you really make yourself stand out from the crowd, and by the way, this is something that if you do properly, not only make you stand out from the crowd, it allows you to charge more. We have brands in our portfolio that sell sometimes the same product as other brands, but because they did an excellent job in branding, sometimes while everybody charges $20, we can charge $60 because the way we convey our presence in the market is unique.
Hello and welcome to Seller Assistant Talks. I'm Oleg Kuzmenkov, the founder of Seller Assistant. Seller Assistant is the best tool for online arbitrage and wholesale on Amazon. In this podcast, we dive into the world of selling on Amazon. We bring in Amazon experts, successful sellers, and partners to share their expertise with you. In today's episode, we're going to speak about how to scale your brand on Amazon. Our special guest is Vincenzo Toscano. He is the owner of Ecomcy agency and helps thousands of Amazon sellers and brands to build their presence on Amazon. Hi, Vincenzo. Thank you for coming to my podcast.
Thank you, Leg. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited to, share some nuggets, as they call it, with your audience in terms of how people can scale the brand on Amazon. And I'm sure we're going to have a very interesting conversation.
Yeah, let's start from the beginning. Who needs to scale their brands on Amazon?
Yeah, I will say this is a conversation I have all the time. Like whenever I talk to an Amazon seller, they always tell me, okay, Vincenzo, what is the secret when it comes to keep growing my business on Amazon? Because sometimes they feel that they're reaching plateau or they don't really have a lot of extra strategies under the sleeve to implement. And I always say, like, usually the reason why that happens is because we have a mindset that is still attached to the old times of doing business on Amazon, which is much more simplistic. And that doesn't really look into the whole business in terms of all the fronts, which is, the advertisement, the customer experience, what we do outside of Amazon, what we do on SEO, and how we connect everything from top to bottom. So I will start that. The first thing that you have to consider when scaling is actually, as you briefly just say, is the thing that you want to do or not. Because the thing when it comes to scaling, you have to be mindful that not only that's going to add complexity when it comes to the operations that you have around your Amazon business, but it's also going to be a very cash flow intensive operation, right? When it comes to scale, which is coming with extra amount of revenue and units that you're basically moving across the Amazon platform, you have to be mindful that means you have to have more inventory in hands, you have to spend more money on advertisement, you have to spend more money in specific software tools to manage the whole operation. So these are things that if you're not mindful of that and you don't have the muscle to sustain that growth, it can be actually negative for your business. So that's the first thing, like understanding what is the roadmap that you want to take moving forward. Because if rather than scaling, your goal is actually to have an exit in next year or so, rather than scaling, I will focus on bringing as much profitability as possible to the business, because that's essentially what is going to give you the best multiple on your business. Now, being said that, let's say we decide to go down the scaling route, which is what most people want to do. We have to understand what usually drives scale from top to bottom, right? And usually I would say there's a few main verticals that have the biggest impact in your business when it comes to scale. The first one would be understanding, first of all, your niche, right? And I know this sounds very simple, but in essence, I can tell you how many times I have a conversation with sellers and they already have one or two products in their niche, but they don't really understand how they can broaden their offerings of products to basically scale their business forward. Because when it comes to scaling the business forward, of course, we're going to talk all the technicality in terms of execution, but at the top of the strategy, there's two main things that are going to allow you to scale your business forward the fastest. One is adding more products to your catalog, and the second one is expanding into new regions. In this case, let's say you're in Amazon USA, you expand to Amazon Europe, Middle East, and etc. Now, going back to the initial point, once you understand your niche, that at the same time is going to allow you to understand also to which extent you can scale. Because I have this conversation a lot, which people say, okay, I'm doing currently $1 million, but when I get to $100 million, but then when we go into the niche, like the actual niche itself, I aggregate the revenue is only $50 million. So even if you grew as much as you wanted, there's not enough volume to sustain your goal in terms of how much you want to scale. So that's why understand the numbers of your niche, understand what is the aggregated revenue of the niche as a whole, and beyond that, understand what are some of your best sellers within that category are doing in terms of revenue. Because if the bestseller is already making 1 million per month and you're already making 800,000 per month, that means you're very close to almost reaching a capacity in terms of how much market penetration you can get within that niche.
So it's better to analyze a niche before you start expanding
Yeah.
to Amazon, right?
Yeah, 100%. Because now, which is, I'm gonna move into my next point. Something you're gonna encounter is that once you understand the size of your market, the next phase you have to really go into in terms of research is understanding what kind of products you can actually expand in terms of your catalog. Because as I said at the beginning, two main things are going to drive expansion. One of them is adding more products to your catalog, and the second one is tap into new regions. The first one, which is adding more products, in order for you to really understand that, is first of all, once you identify the size of the market, identify what other accessories you could be selling in correlation to your main product that could be upsells. It could be like an accessory that can be used with the main product. It could be some kind of extra product that can be used at the same time with the product to maybe attach to a different feature. It could be sometimes a variation. Could be so many verticals that you can take this, and that's usually the thing that I see allowing you to multiply revenue the fastest. Once you do that, the second thing is, once you insert the niche, is okay, if you identify the size of your niche, let's say in the United States, try to identify how big this market is in Germany, in Italy, in the UK. Sometimes you can be surprised and identify that the country you actually been selling all this time is not the biggest one in terms of the interest around your niche. So once you identify that and you understand, okay, actually the US is not the biggest market for my product, it's actually the UK. That's why you have to make a strategic decision if you need to tap also into that region to sustain your goal of scaling your brand on Amazon. So this is the first point before we go into any of the technicality. Understand the size, understand what other products you can bring to market to complement yours and create an ecosystem as a brand, which we're going to talk about brand moving next. And the final things is location, because sometimes the same product and the same offering can be much more successful in our regions, and you just haven't been tapping into those. Now, once we cover that initial phase, the next phase of scale is understanding how we're going to basically sustain the load of that scale, which is the financing side of things, which is what I mentioned at the beginning. You need to understand that when you enter the phase of adding more products or entering into a new region, if you don't have enough cash flow, most likely, which I have seen that unfortunately happen to a lot of sellers, you're going to die midway. Because what is going to happen, it takes so much cash flow in terms of inventory, because inventory is not only a one-time expense that you only order once and that's it. You most likely need to deplete a cash for the first, second, and third one, sometimes of a lot of inventory, until that a new vertical in terms of new product or region start to cover its own expenses and be profitable. So if you don't have that disposable cash, then look into financial solutions out there. There are many in the Amazon space now that will take in consideration your historical revenue in terms of how healthy the business is, and give you a line of credit that can be used for these kind of things I just mentioned. Because if you try to do that only with your cash or the money that your current business is doing, you might also do the mistake that while focusing on scale, you basically take energy from the core of the business, actually a profitable now, and then it become unprofitable. And so once we figure out finances, Then we need to tap into the strategic side of things. And this strategic side of things is a 360 approach that will cover advertisement, will cover ACO, will cover branding, will cover customer experience that's a little bit attached with branding, and then it will cover everything that we do in terms of outside of Amazon to complement our growth. So let's get started with the advertisement side of things. Um, when it comes to advertisement, especially when we are on a growth phase, is completely different than if you do advertisement during a maintenance approach or profitability approach, because essentially it will dictate how aggressive you're gonna be in terms of your bids for your keywords, how much budget you're gonna put towards your campaigns, how experimental you're gonna be with type of advertisement and placements. Also, it's gonna define, for example, if you're looking from advertising point of view, focus on increasing the amount of exposure and focus more on awareness or focus more on conversion. So these kind of conversations you have to define them when you go into scale approach, because if you don't, PPC is the number one thing that we're going to be discussing today that can break your business very fast. Because if you start basically attaching the wrong amount of aggressiveness to your strategy, in a matter of months you're going to burn all the money. The focus is not being going towards the right objectives, and then you're not going to scale. Now, to conclude this point and then to give you the word, like, what are the objectives with PPC when scaling? When scaling, the objectives is all about getting as much market share as possible. It's all about that. And Amazon gives you this with things such as brand analytics. You need to make sure that your PPC is tailored into controlling all your main keywords, and not only controlling from a placement perspective, but also controlling from the KPI in terms of having as many impressions, as many clicks, as many add to carts, and as many purchases within the keyword as possible. That means having market share. Because if you don't, essentially your scale is going to be not successful, because what is going to sustain the scale moving forward is like stairs. You take one floor, second floor, third floor. If you go from floor one to second floor, but then once you go to second floor, the first floor disappear, you're going to go down. And that's essentially market share, controlling that keyword at a very stable with a very stable approach, and then build from there.
What if a brand have their own pricing policy and finally they decide to scale on Amazon, and they found that they need to invest more money on Amazon fees to pay on Amazon to pay for advertising PPC, right?
Mhm.
And what if they find that unit economics is not working the same way that it works in their own business? How to manage such situation? Like, you find that you need to sell products on Amazon in much higher price.
Mhm.
How to manage that?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because I agree. Some of the situations you're going to encounter is just economics on Amazon work different than in your own website. And if you don't are mindful of that, you might end up launching a product or start selling a product on Amazon that then doesn't have the margins that allow Amazon to be profitable in the first place. And this is something that has to be considered during the scale phase. Like, you really need to understand, okay, this is my price point on my D2C website. I'm gonna go to Amazon and focus on scale. Let me actually understand what are the fees that Amazon takes from me, like the referral fee, the FBA fees, storage fees, the shipment fees. All of those things you have to take in consideration, and see if actually, even by having a healthy margin, and that without even putting PPC in the first place, you are left with a healthy percentage. Because if you're not, and then you then start doing PPC, which is what I was explaining towards scale, that's where unfortunately you're always going to be into the red numbers, because the fundamental of the marketplace, in this case Amazon, and the fees surrounded around that might not be feasible for the type of niche that is basically used to a price point that you're not able to accommodate, unfortunately, with your current offering. Yeah.
So let's go next.
Yeah. So now the next thing we talk about a PPC, right? So the next thing, once we cover the PPC side of things, we have to talk about branding. So when it comes to branding, some of the things that we have to be very mindful here is that if you don't really focus on building that recurrent behavior from people to come back to your brand, it's gonna be difficult to scale, because at the end of the day, something that is one of the things most expensive on a business is customer acquisition, right? Is That's the most expensive thing, like acquiring the customer for the first time. Now, if you acquire a customer for the first time and then the branding, which is essentially also customer satisfaction and the whole funnel that a consumer goes through is not optimal, then they're just not gonna feel identified with you as a brand in the first place, and they're gonna change you very fast as long as they find a cheaper option. And therefore, you're gonna struggle to scale because every single time you try to scale, the new consumers they go out, they go out, they go out, and you're not able to build a sustainable amount of cash flow that is gonna allow you to go to the next phase. So when I mention branding, there's so many verticals we can take here, but to keep it simple, it's about, for example, from the moment the client sees your listings in terms of how you convey the message, the tonality on your text, the branding on your images, the packaging of the product, how they feel when they buy the app on the pro in the first place. What is the after purchase experience? Do they get a follow up with a digital asset? Do they get a follow up with an exclusive access to a specific kind of community? Or they get some kind of content that they can use in connotation with your product to have a unique experience? All these things is about branding. And in fact, you see all the big brands, such as, for example, I always use Apple. It's exactly like that. They take care from the moment you go to the website or the moment that you get your iPhone. It's a unique experience that you will never be able to experience with any other mobile phone brand. So it's the same thing. Try to focus on that. And nowadays it's so easy. You have ChatGPT. ChatGPT has access to so much data in terms of a specific category or niche. Like you could easily ask to ChatGPT, for example, right now, I want to do a brand around the yoga space. Come up with a branding concept that really will allow me to convey an effective message toward yoga enthusiasts, right? And then from there, you start getting ideas. You start tailoring this toward a product offering, and then if economics makes sense in terms of what you have to invest on the branding and what the product is going to cost, as you mentioned, at the price point, then you just proceed from that and execute. Now, once you figure out the branding and you really make yourself stand out from the crowd, and by the way, this is something that if you do properly, not only make you stand out from the crowd, it allows you to charge more. We have brands in our portfolio that sell sometimes the same product as other brands, but because they did an excellent job in branding, sometimes while everybody charges $20, we can charge $60 because the way we convey our presence in the market is unique. So if you don't have branding, you're gonna struggle for scale. So make sure branding is core focus from day one. And that's also something that when you decide to exit your business, investors really take care about that a lot. Like if you don't have something that makes you unique from an asset perspective of a brand, that's gonna affect the multiple of your business. Now, ACO. So when it comes to Amazon, it's all about keywords. People on Amazon don't shop products; they shop keywords. And why this is important? Because when it comes to scale, another thing you have to be mindful is what is the level of interest around your specific product on the market. If there is not a huge interest around your product, and what I mean by that is that not a lot of people are searching for it, or not a lot of people is tapping into the specific feature that you offer in your product, you're gonna struggle to scale. So make sure before you put a lot of investment into a product development and bring a new offer to the market, that the keywords are actually there to sustain your scale on Amazon. If that's the case, from an SEO perspective, you have to be very strategic about how you position these keywords on your listing, because if you don't have these keywords on your title, your bullet points, your description, the backend, effectively not only the list is not going to be displayed in the right placement to get the right amount of exposure, you're also going to struggle from the perspective of PPC, because PPC is something that if you don't have the right keywords on your listing, you're not going to show for certain keywords. You're not going to be basically seen as relevant. It might even underperform in terms of paying more in terms of CPC. So you have to be very mindful that ACO is all about the foundation of how your product is visualized on Amazon Eyes. And if you have this wrong, I would say that's the thing that can really ruin the scale of your business.
Develop software I'm not sell products on Amazon, and sometimes I decide what is the next feature I should develop for my customers. And I can ask my customers or think about from my perspective. But what I do, I just open a SEMrush software and choose a keyword which describes my new idea, for example, and I measure the demand. I see how many people Google for this product, or in a Google, right? Not only
Yeah,
on Amazon. You can just go to Google Trends and try to
exactly.
find how many search requests on this product, and then you decide is it worth it to scale on Amazon or not.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's all about data research, having the data in hand. And once the data essentially can quantify the opportunity, that's where you decide if you go for it or not. And I would say the final thing to conclude how to scale, I would say is all the efforts that you can do outside of Amazon. Why? Because I feel nowadays, given that Amazon is getting so competitive, especially on the PPC side of things, you have to be very methodical in terms of what you also do outside of Amazon. This comes from the perspective of if you do any efforts with social medias, like influencer marketing, like PR releases, like working with YouTubers, having Google Ads. Why? Because we have identified that some keywords are getting so expensive on Amazon that sometimes driving external traffic can be actually more profitable for you. And not only more profitable, it can also allow you to sustain your growth and scale faster. Why? Because Amazon loves external traffic. Therefore, if you are very smart in terms of how you bring this external traffic to Amazon and you allow that momentum to get built into your store, you're gonna get positioned organically among the main keywords, which is what is gonna allow you to be profitable in the long term. So, in conclusion, focus on identifying first how your niche behaves. That means what kind of products you can bring to market, what are the best regions. Once you identify that, you need to understand the economics of your business if they can sustain that level of scale. Once that's the case, you start identifying, okay, I need to bring PPC to the picture and how I need to adjust my PPC towards a scale, which again, this is going to be tailored depending on your budget, and we will need a whole new episode in terms of how to do the PPC for scale. But you need to be mindful that PPC towards scale is completely different than towards maintaining a business and making it profitable, which is when you are on standby mode. Focus on the branding. Branding is super important to maintain the loyalty, recurring purchase behavior, lower your customer acquisition cost, and be able to scale. Focusing on the ACO to create that in-depth roots within the Amazon ecosystem of controlling keywords, but also making sure that ACO connects very effectively with your branding in terms of message, but also from a technical point of view with your PPC. And finally, external traffic. Make sure you have a very holistic approach into also tapping into other channels that can allow you to showcase your brand as an expert in your niche, create that awareness, and people know that now they can find you on Amazon. You bring the external traffic, and sometimes can be cheaper than doing advertising on Amazon. And beyond that, Amazon is going to require you to sustain that organic growth, which is effectively going to affect your scale on Amazon. So, yeah, we come full circle, and that's effectively how I will do scaling a brand on Amazon.
Is there money button?
You mean in the sense of strategy?
I mean, what is the money button you should press and get money in your pocket? Is there any money button or sales button that people
Uh,
speak about when they speak about Amazon?
so I will say there's no such a thing as money bottom, and I think that's why sometimes people get burned with Amazon, because it's not as easy as simply just pressing a button and making revenue. I wish it was like that. I would be right now in Ibiza on a yacht and and not making a podcast. It's tough. You need to really put a lot of effort. But I would say if you put the effort and you do the proper research with tools such as Seller Assistant app, I can guarantee you that you're gonna have a successful business. It's just that you have to put the work and stop thinking that this is a business that you make money very easy. Like you have to put the effort and do the research. And if you do, trust me, the opportunities are.
How you personally and Ecomcy agency can help our viewers to scale on Amazon, and what they should do if they want to go with you?
Yeah, so I would say one of the things that I love about what we do at Ecomcy is that we bring the level of expertise that it would be very difficult for a single individual to do in-house, because we have a team of over 40 people. We specialize on all the verticals that make basically a brand be successful and scalable on Amazon, as I just explained. And if you work with us, effectively we make sure that you get as an experts that will take your brand as their own, make sure we attach a full stack team to your current operation, and in a matter of days, effectively we're going to start implementing all these areas that's going to ensure your brand is basically enrouted towards the right direction to make you successful on Amazon.
Thank you, Vincenzo, for such interesting insights. I hope this video help our viewers to better understand how to scale their brands, and they can decide if this business fit them. If so, they will do it by themselves, or even reach you and ask you to help them to selling on Amazon.
Thank you, Leg. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And it's been a pleasure to share some amazing knowledge with your audience and keep doing the amazing work that you guys do. Seller Season App is definitely adding a ton of value. So thank you.
If you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. We will answer all the comments. Ask Vincenzo in the comments about scaling on Amazon, and he will answer all the comments personally. Don't forget to open Seller Assistant app website. We have a lot of information on selling on Amazon. We have a great blog. And also here you can get registered and use Seller Assistant to scale your business on Amazon. Have a good day.